Now, when it comes to Nightmare on Elm Street related stuff today, there's no limit to what you can get, whether it be actual props built from the makers from the films themselves, or custom-made stuff from artists and posters, toys, you name it. Nowadays, we're so spoiled we get figures based off direct scenes from the movie, which is so cool, like this Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5 Dream Child Freddy with a long extended arm and big foot when he's resurrected in the church in the beginning. Pretty freaking cool. Now, back in the 80s, you guys probably know just as well as I do, especially if you were around, Freddy was everywhere, and he was getting all kinds of toys and props and all kinds of great stuff. A lot of cool looking stuff too, like this little squishy Fred that my buddy Phil sent me. Thanks again, Phil. All this stuff is so cool to me, especially some of these fun designs. One of my favorite toys I have from back in the 80s is the Freddy Fright Squirter. Now, I've done a video on this in case you haven't seen it, and this thing is awesome. The packaging is so bubbly, and, you know, everything was brick back then, and it was really cool. And I would start to learn that there was some unlicensed stuff that came out for the character of Freddy Krueger that we're going to look at today that, quite honestly, is both awesome and hysterical. And, most importantly, unlicensed. So let's look at 2 unlicensed amazing Freddy Krueger figures. Here we go. Ah yes, Sharp Hand Joe. Would you believe it? That a company decided they were going to basically turn Freddy into Where's Waldo for a toy. Yeah, this thing's actually real. Let's look at what the package is. So it looks like the name of this series is simply titled Monster. Simple enough. And they basically made figures from Universal monster characters. As we can see, there's a mummy, Frankenstein on the front. Here's one that has the mummy character in there. And they're charming little toys, you know, they seem very harmless. It's just kind of like, okay, they're doing some Universal monster-looking characters. That's pretty cool. You know, here's our Frankenstein, and he's actually named Green Frankie, obviously to avoid any sort of copyright there, as we're going to see. And here's our roster on the back, and at first glance, everything seems, you know, pretty normal. You'll see kind of Universal-looking characters, and then all of a sudden, when you start to look in, you start to see something very reminiscent of what's a Freddy Krueger ripoff. And here is where the legend of Sharp Hand Joe was born. Now somewhat of an online meme, Sharp Hand Joe has got himself a dedicated fan base now. And these figures are pretty expensive, especially if you want to get them in the packaging. Sharp Hand Joe has such a fan base now that a company has actually made a shirt for Sharp Hand Joe. And yes, I bought 2 of them. How do you not love Sharp Hand Joe? So I ask you, watching this now, do you have a Sharp Hand Joe? Let me know. That monster toy line is honestly kind of cool, and I wouldn't mind having any of those, really, especially the Green Frankie. But Sharp Hand Joe takes the cake. I think these figures came out around 89 or 90, and I'm going to have to start checking flea markets to see if I can somehow get lucky and spot a Sharp Hand Joe. And if you can believe it, these toy lines actually got re-put out by a company called Simba under the name Monster Vampire. And here's the newer Sharp Hand Joe. If you can come across this one, I think it's worth even more money. But there is the legend of Sharp Hand Joe. Alright, so before we look at our second bootleg figure, I think we should look at what I would consider the actual licensed version. The Matchbox 1989 Talking Freddy doll. I absolutely love this thing, and I've had it for many, many years. Obviously, back in the day, the coolest thing about stuff like this is the packaging. Now, mine is obviously very road-worn, but honestly, I wouldn't like it any other way. This thing features a lot of cool images from the movies and cool images of the doll with some of the things that it says, like, let's be friends and pleasant dreams. Obviously, stuff that was never said in the movies. But that's why we love it. So here's a good look at the Nightmare on Elm Street 1989 Freddy talking doll from Matchbox. Now, feast your eyes on China's bootleg version, Nightmare Fetty. That is not a typo. You are looking at a bootleg Chinese manufactured Freddy Krueger doll in what is probably the coolest art packaging I have ever seen. Let's take a look at what we have down here because it is pretty much remarkable. So it looks like we've got a big, gorgeous house in the background, a little bit bigger than Nancy's, and Freddy, or should I say Fetty, is rocking a short-sleeve striped shirt, Wrangler jeans, short stubby blades, and a freakish-looking face, to say the least. My God, I need this. Now, based on the research I found, the Nightmare Fetty doll is about a foot tall, 12 inches, the size of standard Kenner Barbie dolls. And this packaging is absolutely killer. I mean, I need this thing yesterday. But it looks like the Fetty doll has gotten a bit pricey as the years have gone by. And by the looks of this Fetty doll, you've got the body, and Fetty has the brains. A nice touch on this doll, to say the least. And wouldn't you know it, a website named glorpgum.com has a Nightmare Fetty shirt for sale. It looks like Fetty has a fan base. But there it is, guys, 2 of the bootleg Freddy Krueger figures. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and I would love to know if there are more out there that I could research and talk about with you guys. But there is, of course, our Sharp Hand Joe and China's Nightmare Fetty. Do you own either of these 2? Let me know. And if you have any lying around that you wouldn't mind selling at a reasonable price, hit me up. For now, though, this is Planet CHH saying have a great rest of your day and watch out, because Fetty's coming. Thank you to all my supporters on Patreon. To get behind the scenes photos, videos, and music, you can subscribe to my Patreon for as little as $1 a month.